Welcome back. We've been looking at presentation modes, and the next stop is that old classic, the oral presentation. In this podcast, we'll look at some important principles and also some tips and tricks. This is not going to be comprehensive, but the good news is that there are many resources available to help supplement and build on what we're going to look at here. So here you are. You've spent months planning, collecting, analyzing, and interpreting your data. You've now got 6 minutes to share your key findings with an audience who, at best, is likely only vaguely interested in your research topic and may or may not be awake after the previous presenters. What they do not need is another forgettable or difficult to understand talk. The first and most important step is to hook their attention. You've got perhaps 30 to 60 seconds to establish the what and the why sufficiently to allow people to decide if they're going to invest attention in the rest of your talk. No need to get fancy here. You need a clear statement of what the problem is, the impact of the problem, why it's important that the problem be solved, and what question you asked to try to solve it. Know your audience as well, since the amount of introductory material required to get people to where you need them to be will be different if you're presenting to clinicians, allied health, scientists, policymakers, etc. Think back to our KT podcast. A well-constructed hook will get people through some of the drier sections still to come. The next step is to determine what you'll actually present. Unless your study is very simple, you'll likely have had one primary question and multiple secondary questions. You do not need to present everything that you did in 6 minutes, as it will detract from the central message. It may all be good stuff, but focus will allow people to take more away in the end. If you're allocated more time, you can talk about more things. I recommend that you at least adequately discuss your primary question and then add key secondary questions in one by one. It's also helpful to present to friends or family who have no ties to the work and see if they can repeat back the take-home points or whether they are bewildered by the amount of content. As you build your presentation, it's important to keep it clean. This applies both to the internal structure of the talk with focused ideas and the visual elements. Avoid eye-bleeding colors or difficult fonts. We've covered some of this in the previous 2 podcasts, but it's an important enough concept that it deserves to be emphasized here as well. How text interacts with slides is often a huge weak spot for presenters. First, there's often too much text for the audience to read and still pay attention. It may be too small or a difficult font as well. One quick way to test this is to stand 2 to 3 meters away from your screen and see if you can still easily read the text. Many programs will automatically shrink the font when you add more content, so be vigilant. Finally, remember that some text and background color combinations are very hard to read. Red on blue is a classic example. Expanding on the issue of text and clutter, there are a couple of special slide violations that deserve unpacking. You've all seen these, and it's remarkably easy to slip into them. First, the wall of text. There is a reason you should use the presenter notes function. The wall of text is visually intimidating and distracts your audience from what you're trying to tell them. Know your content well enough that you don't need to fill the slides with text for your own benefit, and use presenter notes if you feel that you need to have copious notes. It's a bit controversial how much text can or should be on a slide. I've made a particular point of minimizing text in this podcast as an illustration, while in others there's quite a lot of text. This is a different media though. The amount of written text you can manage is greater when your audience can pause and rewind. They can't do this in a live presentation. Second, the massive table. It's really tempting to do a cut and paste of a large and complicated table, but it doesn't serve you or the audience well. It's also not acceptable to do it and then apologize for doing it. Since nobody will be able to read the table and glean what you want them to do in the time available, it's better not to do it at all. Your options can include direct statement of the key points, or remaking a stripped-down table with emphasis of color, font, or animated boxes. This can hold true for complicated diagrams, but there's a way around this. If you have a complex figure or graph, use animation to build it sequentially. It takes time and refinement to get this right, but building a complex diagram instead of jumping to the full one allows the audience to take in more information. I'll show you an example of how this can work. This example is taken from a presentation that I did as a resident on elbow biomechanics and was the subject of much mentorship to solve the obvious issue. This slide is a potential nightmare. There's a lot of stuff to take in. First, you have the main graph with 5 different data series. Each line corresponds to a bone resection, and there are multiple testing positions. It would take the whole time on the slide even to begin to note the details. So we strip it back to the beginning. On the first slide, we establish the variables and the test conditions. We can then sequentially build the slide one bony resection at a time so that the audience can identify and track the data more effectively. We get back to the crazy slide, but we've snuck up on it, and now it's not so bad. As with all things, animation is a powerful tool for good or for evil. This is another thing that your friends and family can help you with. Even if you're not sure where the line between good animation and annoying animation is, they will know and they will tell you. The last step before you go out and do your thing is to own your work. For whatever reason, particularly with trainee researchers, there's a sense that the presentation is a burden to the audience. People present themselves as apologetic and even embarrassed regarding their work. This is not good. First, this is your work and you've spent a lot of time on it. Unless there's some reason why the work itself is substandard, you should be proud of it. Second, nobody knows more about this particular study than you, so be the expert. Third, an important part of the research cycle is to present work to your peers, so don't apologize for doing so. Poor body language and attitude will quickly undermine any points your presentation tries to make. Don't overcompensate with arrogance or hyped-up conclusions, but be quietly confident and take pride in your work. This is a quick list of some of the resources available through the University of Calgary. There are many other resources not listed here, so please do rummage around the web. To sum up, stay focused and build a good hook to engage your audience. Your slides should enable people to better focus on what you're saying and not serve as a distraction. Size does matter here, and what looks okay on your screen may not be what you want on a big screen. In the next podcast, we move into the last group of podcasts on prepping a manuscript, beginning with selecting a journal.